Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be listening to the sermon, Falling Asleep with the Gospel of Matthew, the teachings, miracles, and promises of rest of Jesus. There will be no ads during the listening session, so relax and enjoy. Let us know which country you're listening from in the comments. Part 1. The Modern Wilderness and the Cry for Quiet. Every night, millions of people climb into bed, pull the blankets to their chins, and stare directly into the dark. Outside their windows, the world continues its frantic spinning. Notifications ping, headlines flash with existential dread, and an unspoken, heavy weight sits squarely on the chest of modern humanity. We live in an era of unprecedented comfort, yet we are drowning in an ocean of anxiety. We have optimized our productivity, systematized our routines, and curated our digital personas. Yet when the lights go out, the mind refuses to rest. Why is our collective spirit so restless? It is because we have built our lives on foundations of shifting sand, seeking validation from crowds that do not care about us, chasing wealth that erodes our peace, and maintaining walls of anger that isolate our hearts. 2,000 years ago, a teacher sat on a dusty mountainside in the ancient Near East and looked out over a crowd of weary, broken, and politically oppressed people. He didn't offer them a political revolution or a temporary economic fix. Instead, he offered them a complete inversion of reality. He spoke words that sounded entirely counterintuitive to the ancient mind, and they sound equally radical to us today. He offered a psychology of peace that cuts through the noise of the 21st century like a scalpel, exposing the root causes of our internal chaos. In this script, we are not simply reading historical text or engaging in dry theological debate. We are going to deconstruct the profound, timeless wisdom of Jesus' teachings as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. We will analyze the deep psychological mechanisms behind anger, the exhausting nature of hypocrisy, the antidote to crippling worry, and the transformative power of radical empathy. By blending personal commentary, historical analysis, and contemporary narrative, we will discover how these ancient words provide an exact blueprint for modern mental health, emotional resilience, and an unshakable peace that no external storm can destroy. Let's step away from the noise. Let's sit on that mountainside and truly listen. Part 2. The Inversion of Worth. Matthew chapter 5 breakdown. The text begins with Jesus ascending a mountain, sitting down, and opening his mouth to teach. In ancient times, a teacher sitting down signified that an authoritative instruction was about to commence. What follows is known as the Beatitudes, a series of declarations that begin with the word blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Let's look closely at this first phrase, poor in spirit. In a hyper-competitive world, we are taught to be rich in spirit, to be self-assured, fiercely independent, and brimming with unyielding self-confidence. We are told that the world belongs to the aggressive, the loud, and the self-promoters. Yet, Jesus states that the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who recognize their own spiritual bankruptcy. From a psychological perspective, this is the birth of humility. When you admit that you do not have it all figured out, that you are broken, and that you need help, the exhausting pressure to maintain a flawless facade disappears. The poor in spirit are those who have abandoned the performance treadmill. Then he says, "Blessed are those who mourn." This sounds paradoxical. How can sorrow be a state of blessing? In our modern culture, we have created a toxic positivity narrative. We hide our grief, medicate our sadness immediately, and swipe away our discomfort. But true emotional healing requires us to face our grief. Mourning acknowledges the brokenness of the world and our own lives. By allowing ourselves to mourn, we unlock the capacity to receive comfort. If you never permit yourself to feel the depth of pain, you will never experience the depth of solace. Consider the third declaration: blessed are the meek. The word meek has been misunderstood over the centuries as a synonym for weakness or cowardice. However, in the original Greek context, meekness referred to power under control, like a fierce stallion that has been trained to respond perfectly to its rider's touch. Weakness is the inability to act. Meekness is having the strength to strike, but choosing to hold back out of love and restraint. The meek are not pushovers. They are individuals so deeply anchored in their identity that they no longer need to fight every petty battle or react to every slight. Jesus continues, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Think about what you hunger and thirst for on a daily basis. Is it wealth, status, recognition, or perhaps just being right in an argument? Jesus suggests that chasing these external metrics leaves us chronically empty. If you hunger for applause, you will need more tomorrow just to survive. But if you hunger for righteousness, for justice, alignment with truth and goodness, you will find an internal satisfaction that cannot be stolen by circumstances. He calls his listeners the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Salt preserves and flavors. Light dispels darkness. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. This is an instruction against isolationism. True spiritual peace is not achieved by retreating into a cave forever. It is found by taking that inner quietness out into a dark world to serve others. Part 3. The Root Anatomy of Human Conflict. As the sermon deepens, Jesus transitions from general principles to specific human behaviors. He directly challenges the externalized morality of his day, which focused solely on the physical action rather than the internal motive. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Here, we encounter a fundamental insight into human relationships. Jesus is diagnosing the root anatomy of conflict. Most legal systems judge you based on the final destructive act: murder, theft, assault. But Jesus asserts that the real catastrophe occurs long before the weapon is drawn. It happens in the dark corners of the human heart, through unbridled anger and resentment. When you hold on to anger, when you insult someone by calling them fool or dismissing them with contempt, you are committing a form of character assassination. Contempt is the poison of human connection. It reduces a complex, living human being into an object worthy of disdain. Let's analyze the psychological toll of carrying unresolved malice. When you refuse to settle matters with your adversary, you essentially construct an internal prison for yourself. You think your anger is punishing your enemy, but it is actually burning out your own nervous system. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way. This is practical psychological advice. Prolonged conflict escalates, deepens animosity, and traps both parties in an endless loop of retaliation. He applies this same internal lens to desire. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Once again, the focus is shifted from the physical event to the quality of human attention. Lust objectifies. It looks at another human being not as an image of the divine, but as a utility for personal gratification. Jesus uses hyperbole, gouging out the eye, cutting off the hand, to illustrate the extreme seriousness needed to guard one's mind. He isn't advocating for self-mutilation. He is emphasizing that we must radically remove the triggers and patterns of thought that compromise our moral integrity. Part 4. Breaking the loop of retaliation. Perhaps the most disruptive segment of the Sermon on the Mount deals with how we handle mistreatment. It goes against every survival instinct coded into our DNA. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for eye and tooth for tooth." But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for eye and tooth for tooth." But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. This is the ultimate test of human maturity. Loving those who love you is easy. A shared affinity requires no emotional heavy lifting. Even the most corrupt individuals care for their inner circle. But to extend love, goodwill, and prayer towards someone who actively wishes for your downfall requires a supernatural shift in perspective. It requires realizing that your enemy is also a broken human being, trapped in their own cycle of pain and ignorance. When you pray for your enemy, you free your own heart from the corrosive power of hatred. You align yourself with the universal grace of God, who provides sunlight and rain to everyone without discrimination. Part 5. The Danger of Public Piety. Matthew chapter 6 breakdown. Moving into chapter 6, Jesus addresses the performative nature of religion and human ego. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. So, when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do. The word hypocrite comes from the ancient Greek theater, referring to an actor who wore a large mask to play a part. Jesus warns against turning your virtue into a theatrical performance. In our modern digital ecosystem, this warning is incredibly relevant. We live in an era of public performative goodness, where charity is filmed for social media metrics, and moral outrages are broadcasted to signal righteousness. Jesus states that if you perform your goodness for human applause, that applause is your entire reward. It is a shallow, fleeting, transactional validation. But when you give in secret, when you pray in a closed room where no one can see you but the divine, you are building an authentic, interior life. You are proving to yourself that you do your good deeds because they are inherently right, not because you want to climb a social ladder. He then provides a model for prayer, which we know as the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Notice the sequence of this prayer. It does not begin with a laundry list of personal demands. It begins with alignment, centering the mind on the sacredness of God and wishing for a better world order. It focuses on the present moment. Give us today our daily bread. Not next year's fortune, not a decade of security, but the sustenance needed for this single day. Crucially, it links our personal peace with our willingness to forgive others. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. Forgiveness is not a pass for bad behavior. It is an act of emotional liberation. Refusing to forgive is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. By releasing the debt, you unburden your own soul. Part 6. The Anatomy of Worry and the Zen of the Present. We now arrive at one of the most comforting passages in ancient literature, yet it is incredibly challenging to practice. It targets the very engine of modern anxiety, the fear of scarcity and control. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Let's analyze what worry actually is. Worry is the misuse of the imagination. It is the practice of projecting worst-case scenarios into a future that does not yet exist, and then suffering through them in the present moment. Jesus asks a piercing psychological question. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? The obvious answer is no. Worry cannot change the future, but it completely ruins the present. He points to nature as a profound teacher. See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. Nature operates with a quiet trust in the rhythm of life. The bird doesn't panic that the forest will run out of seeds tomorrow. The wildflower doesn't stress over its appearance. They simply exist in their design. Jesus is reminding us of our intrinsic value. If the fabric of reality provides for the simplest elements of nature, why do we assume we will be abandoned? But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. This is the ultimate formula for mindfulness. Break your life down into 24-hour increments. You have the emotional resources to handle today's challenges today. But when you stack tomorrow's potential problems, next week's uncertainties, and next year's fears onto today's shoulders, the load becomes crushing. Keep your focus on your immediate circle of influence. Act with justice and righteousness right now, and let tomorrow unfold as it will. Part 7. The Speck, the Plank, and the Two Foundations. Matthew chapter 7 breakdown. Chapter 7 shifts focus toward our cognitive biases and how we view other people's flaws versus our own. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? This is a brilliant illustration of psychological projection. It is remarkably easy to spot a tiny flaw in someone else while being completely blind to a massive, glaring defect in our own character. We judge ourselves by our good intentions, but we judge others strictly by their worst actions. Jesus calls this hypocrisy. He commands us to remove our own plank first. When you do the hard internal work of confronting your own weaknesses, your perspective changes. You stop being a harsh critic and instead become a compassionate guide. You realize how difficult it is to change your own habits, so you stop demanding instant perfection from everyone else. He follows this with an invitation to persistence. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. This speaks to the intentionality of our focus. What are you looking for in life? If you look for offenses, you will find them. If you look for reasons to be miserable, they are everywhere. But if you actively seek goodness, truth, wisdom, and peace, your mind will orient itself to find those realities. The sermon concludes with the famous parable of the two builders. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. Notice that both the wise man and the foolish man experience the exact same storm. The rain falls on both houses. The winds howl against both structures. Following this path of wisdom does not make you immune to the tragedies of life. You will still face loss, heartbreak, sickness, and uncertainty. The difference is not the storm, it is the foundation. A life built on consumerism, human approval, and reactive anger will collapse under the weight of a major crisis. But a life built on the rock-solid principles of humility, integrity, forgiveness, and present-moment trust will stand firm, no matter how violent the storm becomes. Part 8. The Power of Compassion in Action. Matthew chapters 8 and 9. As Jesus descends the mountain, the teaching transforms into action. The philosophy becomes practical. He encounters a man with leprosy. In ancient times, lepers were the ultimate outcasts, forced to live outside city walls, completely isolated from human touch, required to yell, "Unclean." If anyone came near them, a man with leprosy came and knelt before him. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." This act of touching the leper is a revolutionary display of empathy. Jesus didn't just heal him from a safe distance with a word. He broke a massive social taboo by physically reaching out and touching him. For a person who hadn't felt human warmth in years, that touch was likely just as healing as the physical cure itself. This challenges us to evaluate how we treat the modern lepers of our society, the marginalized, the unhoused, the lonely, and those broken by addiction. True peace is found when we extend our hands across social divides to offer genuine human connection. Next, a Roman centurion, an officer of the occupying empire, approaches him, asking for help for his paralyzed servant. The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed." Jesus is amazed by this man's faith. The centurion understood authority. He recognized that true power doesn't require performance or physical presence. It operates through total certainty. In chapter 9, Jesus calls Matthew, a tax collector, to follow him. Tax collectors were despised as traitors who extorted money from their own people to fund the Roman war machine. Yet Jesus chooses Matthew to be part of his inner circle. Later, while eating dinner at Matthew's house, the religious elite express outrage. "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." This is a beautiful summary of his mission. A country club for perfect people helps no one. A hospital is meant for the wounded. If your moral philosophy makes you elitist and judgmental, you have missed the point entirely. True wisdom meets people in their mess, treats them with compassion, and helps them step into a new way of living. Part 9. Real-life echoes, stories of the rock and the sand. To understand how these principles function outside ancient literature, let us look at a real-life story from our modern era. Imagine two childhood friends, Arthur and David, who grew up in the same neighborhood and entered the business world around the same time. Both achieved financial success, married, and built beautiful homes. Arthur built his life on what Jesus would call the sand. His entire identity was tied to his net worth, his social standing, and his need to always be the smartest person in the room. He was quick to anger, held onto grudges for years, and constantly stressed over future market trends. He practiced a performative kind of goodness, donating to high-profile charities to ensure his name was displayed on a wall, but treated his employees with cold detachment. When the financial crisis of 2008 hit, Arthur's business collapsed. Because his entire foundation was built on external validation, his internal world imploded. He fell into a deep depression, alienated his family with his bitterness, and spent years blaming the system, his partners, and his bad luck. His house fell with a great crash. David, on the other hand, had quietly built his life on the rock. He had studied the principles of humility and mindfulness. He worked hard, but he treated his business as a vehicle to serve his community rather than a scorecard for his ego. When his employees made mistakes, he remembered the principle of the plank and the speck. He corrected them with gentleness, reflecting on his own past errors. He spent time in quiet reflection every morning, training his mind to focus strictly on the challenges of the present day, refusing to let anxiety over tomorrow steal his peace. When the same financial crisis hit, David also lost his business. He sat in his quiet home, felt the genuine pain of the loss, and allowed himself to mourn. But he did not shatter. He looked at his family and realized that his intrinsic value was completely intact. He did not lose his identity because his identity was never tied to his bank account. Within a year, David started a small consulting firm, using his experiences to help other struggling entrepreneurs rebuild. The same storm hit both men, but David's house stood firm because its foundation was anchored deep in the timeless rock of internal character. This story shows that the words of the Sermon on the Mount are not soft, poetic ideals for an imaginary world. They are practical survival instructions for a harsh reality. Part 10. The Ultimate Takeaway, the Architecture of Peace. We have journeyed through a profound landscape of wisdom. We have seen how Jesus flipped the world's understanding of power, wealth, morality, and peace upside down. What is the ultimate lesson we can take from these chapters as we prepare our minds for deep, restorative sleep? The core lesson is this: your peace is an inside job. The world will never stop having storms. There will always be economic uncertainties, interpersonal conflicts, unexpected disruptions, and moments of grief. If you wait for the world to become perfectly quiet before you decide to find peace, you will never experience it. True peace is achieved when you intentionally change your internal architecture. You trade pride for humility, recognizing that you are a continuous work in progress. You trade the poison of hidden resentment for the liberating power of radical forgiveness. You trade the performative mask of the ego for an authentic life of quiet kindness. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable future and anchor your attention firmly in the grace of the present moment. As you close your eyes tonight, let go of the heavy burdens you were never designed to carry. Let the anxieties about tomorrow take care of themselves. Realize that you are intrinsically valuable, cared for by the universe, and fully capable of standing strong through any storm. Build your foundation on the rock of this timeless truth. Breathe deeply and allow your soul to enter a deep, divine rest.